What's up, everybody? We're Rex Extreme Wealth, and today I told you before from the last video I made was that with the picture of Gracie, Dan, and the other animals. Well, for this case scenario, it is time to talk about why Dan. Okay, let me re-step a few. Let me retake a few steps. In the last bit of the video, I mentioned why that I was going to make this particular video because of why Dan wanted to get out of the zoo as possibly as he can, and we'll get into it now. Okay, so if you want to know more about theories, video games, or other things and stuff with my channel, let's just say make sure to subscribe if you want. And well, here we go. For the Night of the Zoopocalypse, when it comes to Dan, compared to Gracie, who is the cutest character ever, Dan is basically a gruff, a gruff loner in a way. But he's not just a loner. He's a from the wild with skills that kill. I mean, he's a mountain lion, literally, or a puma, or a cougar. That's literally three times the types of names. So when Dan some I don't we don't know how Dan got captured, but probably he was just minding his own business until somehow he was just finding food and then somehow stumbled upon a human campsite, got captured, and then was on his way to the very zoo where he meets Gracie. So of course, this is probably why. Now here, this is what should have been added into the movie. I mean, I'm not know how it should have ended, YouTuber, like or Hai Shi in a way. I'm not like Hai Shi who made so many videos of how it should have ended in certain movies or TV series or whatnot. But when it comes to Night of the Zoopocalypse, when it comes to Dan the Puma or Dan the Mountain Lion, there's a question we should ask. Why it does Dan want to leave the zoo as fast as possible? I already know one reason why. Because he's a zoo born, not a zoo, he's a wild born. And yet, while granted, some of the animals in the zoo were originally wild born, but those of next generations were zoo born. So that's what Gracie is. Grandma Abigail was probably once a wild born, but then captured. Gracie's parents were then somewhere, how sent off or somewhere. And Gracie is still a zoo born. Was born a zoo. So basically, does Dan how does Dan feel about zoos? Well, I can already tell you this. I know most of the zoo animals feel happy that they're safe, but like Gracie said, there's nothing interesting that ever happens there. Like something worse. And it wasn't Dan coming, he was just brought into the fray. So when it comes to Dan, there's pretty much only one reason why he hates zoos. They're prisons to him. That's the big answer to him. I mean, think about it. A wild boar dragged into a zoo, a wild boar such as him coming into a zoo with fake rocks, fake trees, grass, or basically any form of structural object you would see in Mother Nature or in nature in general, like forests, mountains, or savannas, woods. Well, forests and woods are basically the same thing. And jungles and rainforests and deserts, basically all forms of environment for land animals, including for flying. land animals. Well, then again, all flying animals are technically part of the land. So Dan doesn't didn't pretty much like living in a zoo because it's not like his natural home. He feels at home, free, like okay, like the Wild Kratts, for example. When it comes to the cartoon series, okay, granted, it was not a bad show. Sometimes funny, but like they said, it's best for an animal to live free and in the wild. Dan was from the wild. So what makes it sad is that technically you gotta kind of feel bad for the guy. He's not at, you're taking him away from his home. His home, the mountains. A zoo is not a zoo is not the appropriate home for a mountain lion. Mountain lions belong in the very jagged cliffs, the deep, stiff, jagged, whatever kind of thing you can call a mountain. Well, maybe not Mount Everest, considering that would be the only heavily coated animals that could survive the cold. And Dan, when he's talking to a zoo board, he's basically saying that they know nothing about what it means to live in the wild, what it means to be free. Gracie was basically a zoo born. Same with Xavier. Same with Frida. Same with Ash and Felix, as well as the other zoo animals. Such or even the tiny little zoo animals like the bunnies, the chicklets, and the llamas. Or I think they're lambs, maybe? Actually, I think they're lambs, not llamas. Or maybe they are they llamas? I mean, we haven't seen them spit, so they must be lambs. I mean, they're farm animals, so a farm animal wouldn't really consider a llama unless you're in some Mayan jungle. Like if you can remember Pacha from Disney's Emperor's New Groove. But this is not Disney, this is Viva Pictures, the same people who I just recently discovered was the responsible for making the 100%, 200% Wolf movies, as well as the two seasons such as Legend of the Moonstone and Book of Hoth. I still don't know what's going. I'm seeing clips of the second season, but I wish I could see them fully. But with back to the whole Night of the Zoopocalypse. Night of the Zoopocalypse, yes. Dan does not like the zoo because it's like a prison to a wildborn, while it's sort of a free luxury place for all zoo-born. Those who were originally wild-born completely forgot over time what it means to be wild. That's why Dan wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. That's why he grabbed that key. He didn't care. I mean, granted, here's the thing. He actually meant while Gracie and the other zoo-born animals were reluctant to trust him because he was a mountain lion, pretty much a more powerful forest predator compared to a wolf. But then again, Gracie's skinny. She's probably not getting much meat. Actually, I wonder if she's a vegetarian. I mean, you need muscle to be. I mean, she's scrawny, but maybe she is getting a few bits of muscle, but maybe a fish lover? Who knows? Probably getting kibble, because ancestor of dogs. Although they are a different branch of canines. So, Dan did mean what he meant about the watering hole rule. When there's a common threat, and I will even speak on his behalf whenever there's a common threat such as dying of thirst, animals leave each other alone. I can't exactly remember the rest of the part, but it was the leave alone part. And technically, Ash was the one. She I believe, because despite the guy that she being voiced by a guy, she's the one who technically enticed Dan to sort of break a little bit of that rule. But then she sort of decided not to misjudge him ever since he came back to save them, only to be caught by the giant mutant bunny monster, combined with all the other infected zoo animals, minus a zombie Felix. But Dan was pretty much giving when we see Dan arguing with Gracie a lot, it's because he's probably getting tired of the zoo-born clarity or clairvoyance from both Gracie's cleverness and the stubbornness of the other zoo animals. I mean, here's another thing why he doesn't want. I mean, he literally meant he was not going to eat one of them because the zoopocalypse was literally exactly like what he would face in the mountains in terms of watering holes. So Dan wants to. Dan really does want to get back to his home. So he was, and the only way to do that he could get past those gates was with one of the employees' key cards, which Gracie held onto, and he even held up. And despite the fact that her pack were zombified wolves were now zombified, he still technically kept his end of the bargain. He kept his promise. She should have done hers. He was trying his best to compassionately say sorry that she lost her pack to the virus, but she decided to call him a cold-hearted snake when she, which then again, Dan does have a bit of a sarcastic tone. And I mean, sometimes I do. I mean, that doesn't mean we're technically not trying to be evil mannered. We're trying to do our best to fix the situation, to clear up the emotional drama. And that's what Dan was trying to do with Gracie. Dan, after she basically said, after she called him a snake, basically insulting his honor, his pride, considering he's a lion from the mountains. He then decided to say, give me the key. With a goofy animation, I was trying to do the whole thing he was doing with the lower eyelid raising. But then she says, make me. I love Gracie, but I love you, Gracie, but you needed to honor your end of the bargain. You said you would give Dan the key as long as he honored his vow as her bodyguard to take you back to your pack, even if they're now gone, lost to the virus. And then after being bitten by the combined hybrid of the gorilla giraffe hybrid that involves Fred the infected Fred the gorilla with a giraffe. Well, probably the tooth of a gorilla is probably what bit him on his right paw. But then it slowly turned into the zombie. However, after he was cured by the music, not the soap and water that Gracie believed at the time, she basically says that she thinks that she could save the whole zoo with soap and water. Dan, technically, I'm actually on side with Dan on this one, is because Dan, sometimes you can't really save everybody. And I love Gracie, but she did sort of act. I don't want to be in a bad. I am technically still more of a Gracie fan than a Dan fan, but I don't want to say be rude about it. She was sort of childish, so I'll say that. I'm not saying stupid. I'm going to say childish to think she could save everybody. That's why, because Dan was probably going to think about taking her with him, as well as Poot, to the mountains with him, with the key. He was probably going to help Gracie learn to survive. I mean, a Zooborn would barely know how to survive. I mean, granted, yes, she's clever, but strong, fast, agile, or in or have a lot of endurance and durable. She ne- she could have used Dan's help, but she could have listened to Dan's words and helped, and followed him outside the zoo. Even when she wanted to help get the others to help her, the others that weren't infected, there was a reason why didn't want to trust the ostrich that purposely enticed him to attack her. Xavier was fine. Felix is annoying and a bit confused with Frida. However, when comes to between Dan and Gracie, Dan was saying that he wasn't acting like a coward. He was genuinely saying that they should not trust them since those four animals left both him in an unconscious state thanks to another shot in the butt by a tranquilizer dart and a still and a bit scared Gracie and a scrawny Gracie alone to face off against the zombie monkeys and the zombie gorilla, or the zombie primates in general. They literally left those two in the vet room. They were cowards. And that's probably why he didn't like to be called cowardly, because didn't want to be remembered as what the red-ruffed lemur, capybara, ostrich, and proboscis monkey have done. He did not want to be compared to them. Okay, Xavier might be friendlier, but Dan was still going to be reluctant in trusting them. They had the key, and he was almost close to freedom. In fact, after he telling Gracie off, he had and saying that we're done, he was genuinely actually happy that he was becoming friends with a canine since he's a cat and a mountain lion and a wolf. He was wanting to help her. He wanted to help Poot. He didn't want to help those four animals that left him and her to face off against the zombies. They just ran off. I mean, think about this, you foolish four. Or you four foolish fools. Or, no, four foolish cowards. With a wolf who is faster, with a strong bite, you would also have a lion with strength. What's wrong with having two carnivores to protect your ridiculously herbivorous selves? Even herbivores can't protect themselves. That's why carnivores can have more of the strength than herbivores. The only herbivore that I can think that has strength is a Triceratops, especially against going up against a T-Rex. So Dan was even about to leave until Felix stole his key card because he was so close. He was like done with all the zombies. He was done with the prison of becoming a prisoner, and then mostly he doesn't want to deal with childish animals who think they could save a zoo. Hold on, let me check. Oh, it's only 19 minutes. Oh, well, it's about to reach 20. But so when it comes to Dan, as he was about to almost get close to the gate, or find a way to the gate because it was dark and foggy, Felix stole it. Then Felix got turned, and then Dan saved him from tree frogs only so that he could save the key. He doesn't care about Felix. That Felix convinced him that he was just like him, which got Dan to believe it. And it was disappointing. And then he gave the key to Felix and went back to save Gracie and the others. True loyalty there. So that's pretty much why I'm saying this now. I mean, then at the end of the movie, the climax of the movie, after the singing and after the music and singing helped cure the animals, Dan took note. With Gracie not focusing, Dan knew that it was time to take matters into his own hands, sneak the tag away from her, and go to the gates. And that's what he did. But of course, he was genuinely saying that he wasn't so good at so longs. And he even offered that if Gracie were to ever get tired of the zoo life, even for a little bit, just to experience what it's like to live in the wild, he gave her the tag key back to her. So that way, one day, if she were to end up in the forest or the mountains, he would probably show her what it's like to live wild and free. Okay, come on, we need to see that. We need to see that. Actually, the next video about this, I would talk to you about what should we have for a sequel. For a sequel. And that sequel will be a good one, because I actually thought of how it should go. But for now, I hope you all enjoy. I'll see you all next time. Bye!